It was a bright Saturday morning in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek. The street smelled faintly of freshly cut grass. Sprinklers hissed in the distance, and the air buzzed with that peculiar calm of families waking up late, brewing coffee, and planning their weekend chores. But for Marcus Reed, this morning was anything but ordinary. Marcus was a tall, broad-shouldered black man in his late 30s. He had a presence that carried weight, not just because of his frame, but because of the way he carried himself. Calm, confident, and observant. He had the kind of eyes that noticed everything. The chip in the neighbor's mailbox, the way a stray dog limped down the sidewalk, the curtain that moved when someone thought they weren't being watched. Years of training had sharpened him into someone who could read a room in seconds. Because Marcus wasn't just any homeowner moving into Willow Creek. He was FBI. But to the outside world, on this particular Saturday morning, he was just a man unloading boxes from a U-Haul parked in front of his brand new home. And that's where the trouble began. "Excuse me." The shrill voice cut through the quiet hum of the street like a blade. Marcus looked up from the box in his arms. Standing on the curb, arms folded tightly across her chest, was a woman he hadn't seen before. Blonde bob haircut, oversized sunglasses, clipboard tucked against her ribs. Her stance was stiff, guarded, like she was ready for a fight she had no business starting. Marcus didn't need an introduction to know who she was. Every neighborhood had one. The self-appointed enforcer. The hoe. "Karen, I'm talking to you," she said, taking a few steps closer, heels clicking against the sidewalk. "What exactly are you doing here?" Marcus set the box down slowly, deliberately, as if the weight of it had suddenly become fragile. He straightened to his full height, towering over the woman who barely reached his chest. "I'm moving in," he replied calmly. "This is my house." Karen's lips twisted into a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, I don't think so. The Johnsons lived here. They didn't mention selling. And I happen to know everyone in this community." Marcus exhaled slowly through his nose. He dealt with people like this before, in interrogation rooms, intense community meetings, on the street. The kind who thought authority was theirs by default. No badge, no law, no justification needed. "I bought this property 2 weeks ago," he said evenly. "Closed the deal fair and square. Got the keys yesterday." He held them up, letting them jingle for effect. But Karen wasn't satisfied. She tilted her chin up, scanning him like he was some intruder sneaking through the window. "Funny," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Because I've never seen you before. And you don't look like the kind of person who belongs here." The words hit the air heavy. Marcus didn't flinch, but inside, a quiet fire sparked. He knew what she meant. She wasn't questioning the deed, or the keys, or the closing paperwork. She was questioning him. His skin, his presence, his right to exist in the same space as her. "I'll give you one chance," Karen continued, her voice sharp, "to tell me the truth, before I call security, or the police." Marcus tilted his head, studying her the way he might study a suspect lying during questioning. Calm, patient, unbothered on the surface. But this wasn't a suspect. This was his neighbor, and she had no idea who she was dealing with. The street seemed to hold its breath. A few curtains shifted. Neighbors peeked out of second-story windows, watching the scene unfold. The sound of sprinklers in the distance suddenly felt too loud, too sharp, as if the whole neighborhood was tuned into this confrontation. Marcus slowly stepped forward, closing the space between them until he stood just a few feet away. His voice was steady, quiet, controlled. "Ma'am," he said, "I told you already. This is my property. I'm moving in. Now, unless you plan to pick up a box and help me, I suggest you get out of my way." Karen's mouth fell open as if no one had ever spoken to her like that before. She clutched her clipboard tighter, knuckles whitening. "You've got some nerve," she snapped. "Marching in here like you own the place. I am the Homeowners Association president. That means I have authority over who lives here. And you," she jabbed a finger toward his chest, "you don't belong." Marcus let the silence stretch, heavy and suffocating. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't give her the satisfaction of reacting. Then, slowly, deliberately, he bent down, picked up another box, and turned his back on her. "Hey, don't you walk away from me," Karen shouted, her voice rising, echoing down the street. But Marcus kept moving, carrying the box through the front door, his footsteps measured and steady. The last thing he heard before the door shut behind him was Karen's voice, sharp as broken glass. "I'm calling the cops. Right now." Inside, Marcus set the box down in the hallway, his jaw tight. He dealt with prejudice his entire life. In schools, on the job, even in grocery stores when strangers made assumptions. But something about this, being told he didn't belong in his own home, burned deeper. He pulled out his phone and glanced at the time. If Karen really was calling the police, he knew what was coming next. The flashing lights, the questions, the sideways looks. He also knew he was ready, because Karen had made one colossal mistake. She thought she was dealing with just another black man to bully, to intimidate, to push out. She had no idea Marcus Reed was FBI. And if she wanted a fight, she was about to get one. The walls of Marcus's new home echoed with the faint emptiness of a place waiting to be filled. Cardboard boxes lined the living room, some labeled in bold black marker. Kitchen, bedroom, office. The scent of fresh paint still lingered in the air, a reminder that this house was supposed to mark a new chapter in his life, a new beginning. But the sound of Karen's voice outside, shrill, indignant, carrying across the cul-de-sac, threatened to poison that hope before it even began. Marcus took a slow breath, letting the anger settle into something sharper, something controlled. He'd learned long ago that in confrontations, power didn't come from yelling back. It came from composure, from silence, from letting the other person reveal exactly who they were. Still, his heart wasn't made of stone. He thought of his mother's words, years ago, back when he was just a teenager in Atlanta. "Marcus, you're going to have to work twice as hard, keep twice as calm, and be twice as prepared, because the world's gonna see your skin before it ever sees your soul." And today, her words were ringing in his ears. He peeked through the blinds. Sure enough, Karen was still outside, pacing near the curb with her phone pressed tight to her ear. Her free hand gestured wildly as she spoke, as though she were giving a dramatic performance for anyone who might be watching. And people were watching. Across the street, a man watering his lawn had stopped mid-spray, hose dangling loosely in his grip. Two teenage girls sat on their porch swing, eyes wide, whispering to each other. Curtains fluttered in several windows, the neighbors careful not to be seen while being very much invested in the show. Marcus clenched his jaw. He wasn't embarrassed. He was furious, because this wasn't just a woman being nosy. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was the kind of scene that could turn dangerous in seconds. A black man accused of trespassing. Police called without cause. Neighbors already suspicious. He'd seen too many stories end badly. And though he wore no badge at this moment, the instincts of an FBI agent surged through him. Document. Observe. Control the situation. Marcus grabbed his phone and opened the camera, recording through the blinds. He made sure to capture Karen pacing, her lips moving rapidly into the phone. Evidence. Just in case. Then he set the phone down and braced himself. A knock rattled the door. Hard, impatient. Marcus opened it. Karen stood there, still clutching her phone. She lowered it just enough to spit out words like venom. "Police are on their way," she snapped. "You might as well save yourself the trouble and leave now. This is private property, and you're trespassing." Marcus kept his tone level. "I told you, this is my home. You're harassing me." Karen scoffed, as if the idea of her harassing anyone was laughable. "Don't you play the victim card with me. I know how this works. People like you think you can slip into places you don't belong, and people like me?" Marcus interrupted, his voice dropping low, steady. Karen blinked, but didn't back down. "You know exactly what I mean. I've lived here for 15 years, and we have standards. This is a safe community, and I'll be damned if I let some stranger waltz in without the proper checks." Marcus studied her face. Every twitch, every glare. He'd seen hardened criminals in interrogation rooms show more honesty than this woman did standing on his porch. "You don't make the rules," he said finally. Karen straightened, puffing up with authority. "As HOA president, I absolutely do. And I'll make sure the board votes you out before you even unpack. We don't need troublemakers here." Marcus almost laughed. Trouble. The word sounded absurd when aimed at him. A man who'd spent years investigating gang leaders, infiltrating fraud rings, and dismantling trafficking networks. And now, in his own neighborhood, he was being called a troublemaker by a woman with a clipboard. Sirens wailed in the distance. Marcus's gaze shifted past Karen to the street, where flashing blue and red lights began to streak against the neat rows of suburban houses. His chest tightened, not out of fear for himself. He knew he could handle it, but out of dread for what this scene might turn into. Karen smiled, smug satisfaction washing over her face. "Good. They're here. Now we'll see who's lying." Marcus stood tall, shoulders squared, hands loose at his sides. He knew how quickly police responses could spiral. He also knew his calm demeanor, his choice of words, his very body language could mean the difference between escalation and control. But he wasn't naive. The sight of a black man accused of trespassing, standing on a porch in an upscale neighborhood, could be enough for someone to make a dangerous mistake. Karen waved frantically as the patrol car rolled to a stop, 2 officers stepping out. "Over here. Over here. That's him. He's the one." The officers approached cautiously. One was tall, mid-40s, with a weathered face and eyes that scanned everything. The other was younger, early 20s, still carrying that rookie stiffness in his posture. "Sir," the older officer called out. "Can we see some ID?" Karen jumped in before Marcus could answer. "He doesn't live here. He broke in, and he's refusing to leave. I caught him hauling boxes inside. I don't even know how he got the keys." Marcus raised his hands slightly, not in surrender, but in a gesture of openness. Calm, controlled. "This is my property," he said evenly. "My name is Marcus Reed. I closed on this house last week. Keys are mine. Paperwork's inside if you want to see it." The younger officer shifted, glancing at Karen, then back at Marcus. "You got ID on you, sir?" Marcus nodded, moving slowly. "In my wallet. Back pocket." "I'm going to reach for it now." Both officers gave a slight nod. He retrieved it carefully and handed it over. The older officer examined it, brows furrowing as he cross-checked the name with his notes. Karen, meanwhile, was practically vibrating with impatience. "Don't be fooled. He probably forged that. People like him." "Ma'am." The older officer cut her off sharply. "That's enough." The authority in his voice silenced her instantly, though her glare could have burned holes through steel. Marcus stood still, breathing steadily, as the older officer handed his ID back. "Mr. Reed," the officer said, tone shifting to something more respectful. "Do you have any paperwork to prove ownership?" "Just to clear this up." Marcus nodded again. "Inside. Closing documents are in a folder on the counter. You're welcome to come in and take a look." Karen gasped. "You're not seriously buying this?" "He's lying. I know he doesn't belong here." But the younger officer ignored her, following Marcus inside while the older one stayed back to manage the scene. As Marcus led the rookie to the kitchen, he felt that simmering anger again, not just at Karen, but at the fact that this was happening at all. His first morning in a new home, and instead of unpacking, he was proving his innocence. The rookie studied the paperwork carefully. Everything checked out. When they returned to the porch, Karen's expression faltered for the first time. "Well?" she demanded. The older officer's jaw tightened. "He owns the house. Everything's legitimate." Karen's face turned red, blotchy with rage. "That can't be right. You're making a mistake. I'm telling you, he doesn't belong here." Marcus locked eyes with her, voice calm but sharp as a blade. "No, Karen. You don't get to decide who belongs. Not here. Not anywhere." The silence that followed was heavy, electric, stretching across the watching neighborhood like a thundercloud waiting to burst. The patrol car pulled away, lights off now, leaving behind the quiet hum of suburban normalcy. But there was nothing normal about the way Marcus felt. He should have felt relief. The officers had checked the paperwork, confirmed the truth, and cleared him. But the tightness in his chest didn't fade. He knew better than to think this was over, because people like Karen didn't let things go. As the squad car disappeared around the corner, Karen was still standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, face twisted in fury. Her phone was clutched in her hand, thumbs tapping furiously. She wasn't finished. If anything, she was just getting started. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching her. He wanted to slam the door, shut her out, drown himself in unpacking, and pretend this never happened. But instincts told him to stay alert. Observe, document, anticipate. The FBI training kicked in like muscle memory. He pulled out his phone again, pressed record, and captured Karen pacing, muttering, making calls. Every second of footage could be valuable if this escalated further, and he had a feeling it would. Half an hour later, the sound of car doors slamming broke the fragile silence. Marcus looked out the window. 2 more vehicles had pulled up, sleek black SUVs, not police. Out stepped 3 men and 2 women, all dressed in business casual, clipboards in hand. They looked like they'd come straight from a board meeting. The HOA. Karen led them up the driveway like a general presenting her troops. She pointed toward Marcus's front porch with theatrical flair, whispering urgently, her voice carrying just enough for him to catch words like trespassing, unsafe, and community standards. Marcus exhaled, steadying himself. He'd barely lived here a full day, and already, a firing squad had formed outside his house. He opened the door and stepped onto the porch, arms crossed loosely across his chest, posture calm but strong. "Mr. Reed?" one of the men asked, flipping through papers on his clipboard. He was tall, bald, with a neatly pressed polo shirt tucked into khakis. His tone carried the clipped politeness of someone who thought they were in charge. "We've received a complaint from our HOA president. She claims you violated community rules." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I've been here less than 24 hours. What rule could I possibly have broken?" Karen jumped in before anyone else could speak. "You broke several. First of all, there are specific moving hours outlined in the HOA guidelines. No moving trucks allowed after 5 p.m. Second, you haven't submitted the proper paperwork for residency approval. And third," she lowered her voice dramatically, as though revealing a scandal, "you've already caused a disturbance by involving law enforcement." Marcus almost laughed, but the absurdity only deepened his frustration. "Let me get this straight," he said slowly, scanning the small group of board members. "You're accusing me of breaking rules I never even had access to, since no one from this HOA ever gave me your handbook. And you think me defending myself against a false accusation is somehow my fault?" The bald man cleared his throat. "Mr. Reed, our community is built on order and cooperation. We can't make exceptions if there's already conflict. That sets a dangerous precedent." Karen smirked, satisfied, arms folded as though she'd already won. Marcus felt the fire in his chest heat, but he kept his tone even, his words sharp. "Conflict doesn't come from me, sir. Conflict came to my doorstep. And if this is how you treat new homeowners, maybe the precedent is the problem." The board members shifted uncomfortably, glancing at one another. They hadn't expected him to be articulate, calm, firm. They'd expected defensiveness, maybe anger, something they could twist against him. Karen wasn't deterred. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Marcus and the nearest board members could hear. "Listen," she hissed. "You can try to play lawyer all you want, but this is our neighborhood. People like you don't last long here. I'll make sure of it." Marcus met her glare head on. He didn't flinch, didn't back down. He simply held her stare until she shifted, eyes darting away for the first time. Then, with deliberate calm, he pulled his phone from his pocket and tapped the screen. Karen froze as the sound of her own voice, recorded minutes ago, played back loud and clear. "People like him don't belong here." He probably forged that. People like him. The whole members stiffened. One of the women's eyes widened. The bald man swallowed hard. Karen's face turned crimson. "Why you can't?" Oh, I can. Marcus interrupted smoothly, lowering the volume but keeping the recording running. And if you think intimidation is going to work on me, you've miscalculated. The group went silent. The suburban air seemed thicker now, charged with tension. Marcus knew this was a pivotal moment. He could push harder, expose Karen completely, force the whole members to confront her bias. But part of him wanted to wait, to let them dig their hole deeper, to let them reveal their true colors before he played his full hand. Because the truth was, he wasn't just any homeowner defending himself. He was FBI. And if Karen and her crew thought they could bully him out of his own property, they were about to learn just how badly they'd underestimated him. Still, Marcus chose restraint. For now. He pocketed his phone, looked directly at the bald man, and said, "If you'd like to discuss community guidelines, I'll be glad to review a copy once you provide one. Until then, I suggest you let me finish moving into my own home without further harassment." The bald man hesitated, clearly caught between Karen's pressure and Marcus's unwavering composure. Finally, he nodded stiffly. "We'll provide the handbook. Expect it by tomorrow." The whole group retreated, murmuring amongst themselves. Karen lingered a moment longer, her eyes locked on Marcus with icy hatred. "This isn't over," she spat. "Not by a long shot." Marcus gave her a slow, measured nod. "You're right. It isn't." That night, as the sun dipped low and painted the neighborhood in shades of gold, Marcus sat on the floor of his empty living room, surrounded by unopened boxes. He should have been exhausted from moving. Instead, his mind was racing. This wasn't just about one woman with too much time on her hands. This was about power, misused, unchecked, hidden behind the veneer of community standards. And Marcus knew something Karen didn't. Abuse of authority was his specialty. Investigating corruption, dismantling unjust systems, holding people accountable. That was his life's work. So if Karen wanted a war, she just declared it against the wrong man. The next morning dawned clear and sharp, sunlight bouncing off the freshly washed cars that dotted Willow Creek's pristine driveways. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, sipping black coffee from a paper cup, his laptop open in front of him. He hadn't unpacked much yet, but he had what he needed: a secure connection, his phone, and his instincts. Last night's confrontation replayed in his mind. Karen's words, her smug smirk, the HOA's silence, the rookie officer's uncertain glance. Marcus knew how this game worked. First came the intimidation, then the rules, selectively enforced, then the manufactured complaints, piling up until life became unbearable. They'd try to corner him, make him feel like he didn't belong, until he either left or snapped. But Karen had no idea who she was up against. Marcus wasn't some rookie homeowner clueless about his rights. He wasn't just another target. He was an FBI special agent trained to see through lies, to dismantle systems of manipulation, and to protect himself when things turned ugly. And things were about to turn ugly. The knock at the door came at 10 a.m. sharp. Marcus opened it to find a plain envelope taped to his door. Bold black letters stamped across the front read, "Notice of violation." His jaw tightened. Already? He tore it open. Inside was a typed letter on whole letterhead, citing 3 alleged infractions. Unapproved exterior modifications. He'd changed nothing but bringing in boxes. Noise complaints from neighbors. He hadn't even played music, just unloaded a truck. Failure to obtain HOA approval before moving in. At the bottom, in neat cursive, was Karen's signature. Marcus chuckled under his breath. It was so sloppy, so desperate. She hadn't even bothered to disguise her hand in this. Still, as ridiculous as the claims were, he knew they were dangerous. Paper trails mattered. Documentation could be weaponized. And Karen had just fired the first official shot. By afternoon, the real escalation came. Marcus had stepped outside to grab another box from the U-Haul when he noticed the flashing lights again. But this time, it wasn't just one squad car. 2 patrol cars pulled up, parking across his driveway. His stomach sank, not from fear, but from the realization that Karen was doubling down. She'd called them again. Sure enough, she strutted out of her house across the street, flanked by 2 of the whole board members. clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched high. Her expression screamed smug satisfaction. "There he is," she declared dramatically, pointing toward Marcus as though she'd uncovered a criminal mastermind. "I told you, officers. He's refusing to comply with community standards. He's trespassing, violating our rules, disturbing the peace." "Karen," Marcus said flatly, cutting her off. "You're lying. Again." The officers looked between them, uneasy. The older cop from yesterday was back, his weathered face more annoyed than concerned. The younger rookie shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Reed," the older officer said carefully, "we're responding to multiple complaints from the HOA." Karen pounced on the words like a cat on prey. "Exactly. Multiple complaints. This man is hostile, disruptive, and refuses to cooperate. He even threatened me yesterday." "That's a lie," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. He held up his phone and tapped the screen. Once again, Karen's voice filled the air. "People like him don't belong here." The rookie's eyes widened. The older officer pinched the bridge of his nose, clearly exhausted by the charade. "Ma'am," he said sharply to Karen, "you need to stop making false claims. This is the second time you've wasted our resources." Karen's face turned beet red. "False claims? Are you kidding me? You're all blind. Can't you see what's happening here? He's dangerous. He's hiding something. People like that don't just move into Willow Creek overnight without." Her words froze midair. Because for the first time, Marcus let a different kind of authority slip into his tone. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small leather case, and flipped it open. The gold badge caught the sunlight, gleaming. The letters were unmistakable. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The silence was deafening. Even the birds seemed to pause. Karen's mouth fell open. Her sunglasses slid slightly down her nose. The board members behind her froze, eyes wide. The rookie muttered, almost under his breath, "Oh, damn." Marcus's voice was calm, steady, unshakable. "My name is Special Agent Marcus Reed, FBI, and I've had enough of this harassment." The shift was instantaneous. The older officer straightened, his demeanor respectful now. "Agent Reed, apologies. We weren't informed." "You didn't need to be," Marcus said, cutting him off smoothly, "because I never planned to use this as leverage. I came here to live, quietly, like any other homeowner. But Karen here has made that impossible." Karen sputtered, her confidence crumbling. "She's bluffing. That's fake. It has to be fake." Marcus arched an eyebrow. "Would you like to test that theory? Because filing a false police report against a federal agent carries a very different weight." Her face drained of color. The board members took a small step back. The rookie officer cleared his throat, shifting awkwardly. Agent Reed, what would you like us to do here?" Marcus pocketed the badge, his gaze never leaving Karen's. "Document this. Every call, every complaint. Because this isn't just a nuisance anymore. It's harassment. And harassment can have consequences." The officers exchanged a look, then gave him a firm nod. As they walked back to their cars, Karen tried desperately to recover. She turned to the board members, whispering furiously, "You can't just let him intimidate us. He's lying. He's dangerous." But they looked shaken, rattled. The certainty in their faces from yesterday was gone. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply turned and carried another box inside, his back straight, his steps steady. But inside, he knew the war had shifted. This was no longer a petty power play. This was about exposure, authority, control. Karen had just discovered that her target wasn't prey. He was a predator she couldn't intimidate. And if she thought she could weaponize the HOA against him, Marcus was ready to show her just how badly she'd miscalculated. That night, as Marcus sat in his half-unpacked living room, he thought about his mother again, about the warning she'd given him, about how many times he'd been forced to prove his right to exist in spaces others walked into without question. But this time was different. This time, he had the tools, the authority, and the evidence to fight back. And he was done playing nice. Karen wanted a war? She just triggered the turning point. Because Marcus wasn't just going to defend himself. He was going to dismantle her entire game. The revelation of Marcus's badge had shaken Willow Creek like a thunderclap. The sight of gold letters flashing in the sunlight lingered in everyone's minds, replayed in whispers behind closed doors. For a brief moment, Karen's empire of intimidation had cracked. But if Marcus thought that would end things, he underestimated her obsession. Because Karen wasn't the type to retreat. She was the type to regroup, reload, and come back louder. 2 days later, Marcus noticed the shift. When he stepped out to collect his mail, he caught the eyes of 2 neighbors across the street. They looked away quickly, whispering, their gazes darting nervously back toward Karen's house. Later that evening, while Marcus was bringing in groceries, he overheard a muffled conversation between 2 HOA board members parked near the cul-de-sac. Words like background check, dangerous, and needs to go floated across the quiet night air. Karen had started her campaign. Marcus could see it in the way people avoided him now, not openly hostile, but cautious, uncertain, like he was a shadow creeping at the edge of their perfect neighborhood. The smear had begun. Inside, Marcus set the grocery bags down, rubbed his temples, and thought through his options. He could escalate immediately, file harassment charges, take Karen to court, even pull rank as a federal agent and shut her down. But years in the Bureau had taught him that timing mattered. Strike too early, and the enemy plays the victim. Strike too late, and the damage festers. So Marcus decided on something else. He would gather evidence, not just of Karen's words, but of her pattern. Her lies, her harassment, her manipulation of the HOA. He would build a case so airtight that when the hammer finally dropped, there would be no escaping it. And in the meantime, he would not let her see him sweat. That strategy was tested sooner than he expected. On Thursday afternoon, as Marcus unloaded a few final boxes from his garage, Karen marched up the driveway flanked by 2 board members. She didn't waste time. "Mr. Reed," she said loudly, making sure the neighbors within earshot could hear. "The HOA has received additional complaints about your conduct. You've been observed intimidating residents and creating a hostile environment." Marcus leaned against the garage frame, calm as ever. "Intimidating residents? Or refusing to let you harass me without consequence?" Karen bristled. "Don't play word games. We've also discovered that you failed to disclose your occupation on the residency forms. That's a direct violation of HOA rules." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "My occupation isn't your business, and you don't get to invent violations just because you don't like me." Karen smirked, triumphant. "Oh, but it is our business. This community has a right to know who's living among us. And the fact that you conveniently flashed a badge without ever mentioning it before, well, it raised questions." Marcus tilted his head, studying her. "Careful, Karen. Spreading lies about a federal agent isn't just slander. It's obstruction." One of the board members shifted uneasily. The other scribbled notes on a clipboard, though his hand trembled. Karen's smirk faltered for half a second before she regained her composure. "We'll see about that. The board is convening an emergency meeting tomorrow night, and your future here will be decided." After they left, Marcus closed the garage door and let the silence settle. An emergency meeting. Of course. Karen was trying to fast-track his removal before the neighborhood caught on to her bias. But what she didn't realize was that Marcus had no intention of being blindsided. That night, he set up small, discreet cameras around his porch and garage. Nothing invasive, nothing illegal, just enough to capture interactions. He made digital backups of every notice, every letter, every voicemail. And then, he reached out to a trusted colleague at the Bureau. "Need you to run a quiet background check," Marcus said over the phone. "Name's Karen Whitfield, president of the Willow Creek HOA. See what comes up." The colleague chuckled. "You moving in somewhere new already stirring up trouble?" "Not me," Marcus said. His tone hardened. "Her." The following evening, the emergency meeting took place in the community clubhouse, a squat brick building with white shutters and a flagpole planted proudly in front. Marcus arrived early, dressed sharp in a dark blazer, his posture calm but commanding. As he stepped inside, the murmurs quieted. Dozens of residents filled the folding chairs. their expressions a mix of curiosity, suspicion, and unease. Karen stood at the front beside a long table, her clipboard and notes spread out like weapons. Her voice rang loud and confident as she opened the meeting. Neighbors, thank you for coming on such short notice. As your HOA president, it's my duty to protect the integrity and safety of Willow Creek. And unfortunately, we have a serious situation on our hands. All eyes turned toward Marcus. Karen let the silence stretch before continuing. This man, Marcus Reed, moved in under questionable circumstances. He's brought law enforcement to our peaceful streets twice already. He's refused to comply with community standards. And worst of all, he misrepresented himself on official documents. That is grounds for immediate action. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Marcus stayed still, hands folded loosely in front of him. He waited. Let her dig deeper. Karen leaned forward, her tone sharpening. Now, some of you may have been swayed by his little display the other day, flashing a badge, dropping the FBI line. But ask yourselves this: if he's truly who he says he is, why is he hiding it? Why didn't he disclose it from the start? What is he really doing here? The tension in the room thickened. Some neighbors looked uncomfortable. Others nodded slightly, buying into her narrative. Marcus finally stepped forward. May I? His voice was calm, steady. Karen smirked. By all means. He walked to the center of the room, meeting the eyes of the neighbors one by one. My name is Marcus Reed. I'm your neighbor. I moved here because I wanted peace, quiet, and community. I didn't come here looking for conflict. He let that hang in the air, then continued. But from day one, Karen has harassed me. She called the police, twice, claiming I was trespassing in my own home. She spread lies, fabricated violations, and tried to intimidate me into leaving. I've recorded every word, every threat, every false accusation. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's eyes widened. Marcus pulled out his phone, tapped a button, and the audio filled the clubhouse. People like him don't belong here. He probably forged that. People like him. The words hung heavy, undeniable. Neighbors shifted in their seats, eyes darting to Karen, who was now pale as chalk. Marcus's voice cut through the silence. This isn't about community rules. This is about prejudice, and I won't tolerate it. Not for myself, not for anyone else who lives here. The room was electric. Some neighbors clapped softly. Others exchanged uneasy looks. But the spell of Karen's authority had cracked. She slammed her clipboard on the table, her voice shrill. You can't just. This is out of context. He's manipulating you. He's dangerous, don't you see? But her words rang hollow now. Marcus stood tall, calm and unshaken. You want a confrontation, Karen? You've got one. But I promise you, this ends with the truth. And the truth is not on your side. The clubhouse meeting ended in chaos. Some neighbors stood and applauded Marcus's calm, devastating rebuttal. Others slipped out quietly, whispering nervously. But Karen, her face blotched red with fury, stormed out with her board members scrambling behind her. Marcus didn't need to be a profiler to read her. She wasn't beaten. Not yet. She was cornered. And that made her dangerous. The very next morning, the retaliation began. Marcus woke to find a bright orange notice plastered on his mailbox. Community violation. Unauthorized exterior fixtures. Below it was a $500 fine. By noon, another notice appeared, citing his garbage bins for being visible from the street. Then, one for unapproved landscaping, each fine larger than the last. It was laughable, almost cartoonish. Karen throwing the entire whole rulebook at him like confetti. But Marcus didn't laugh. He knew what this was. The goal wasn't the fines. It was psychological warfare. Grind him down. Make him crack. Instead, Marcus carefully removed each notice, scanned it, and added it to the ever-growing evidence file on his laptop. By evening, when Karen came marching up the sidewalk with her clipboard, Marcus was already on the porch waiting. You're wasting paper, he said flatly. Karen's smile was thin, brittle. I'm enforcing community standards, something you clearly don't respect. Marcus leaned on the porch rail. Funny, because it looks a lot like targeted harassment. And you know what the law calls it when someone in a position of authority uses their power to intimidate? Karen's smile faltered, but only for a second. You don't scare me. Marcus tilted his head, voice low. Maybe you should be scared of yourself, because I've got every word, every notice, every threat documented. When this goes to court, and it will, you won't be president. You'll be a defendant. For the first time, Karen had no quick retort. She just glared, turned sharply, and stalked back to her house. That night, Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from his bureau colleague. Got what you asked for. Your HOA president has a history. 2 prior civil suits for discrimination. Settled out of court. A harassment complaint at her last job. And some suspicious HOA finances. Sending you the files now. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he scrolled. It was worse than he thought. Not only did Karen have a history of targeting people who didn't fit her mold of perfect neighbor, but she had a trail of questionable money transfers linked to HOA funds. Thousands of dollars siphoned into maintenance fees that no contractor could verify. This wasn't just prejudice. It was corruption. And Marcus now had the ammo to end her once and for all. The following weekend, Willow Creek hosted its monthly community barbecue at the clubhouse lawn. It was one of those events designed to project the neighborhood's image of unity. Kids chasing each other across the grass, music playing from a rented speaker, folding tables covered in potluck dishes. Karen, of course, was front and center, clipboard in hand, shaking hands like a politician desperate to retain her base. Marcus arrived late, deliberately. He walked in carrying a slim black folder, and every eye seemed to follow him. Conversations hushed. The tension was palpable, like the air before a thunderstorm. Karen spotted him instantly, her face tightened. "Oh, look who decided to join us," she said loudly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I suppose you're here to cause another scene?" Marcus's gaze swept the crowd. "Actually, I'm here to share something important. Something every resident deserves to know." He set the folder on a table, flipped it open, and pulled out a stack of papers. "These," he said, raising his voice so everyone could hear, "are financial records from our HOA. Records that show thousands of dollars diverted into accounts that don't exist. Records signed by Karen Whitfield, your president." A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Karen barked a laugh. "That's ridiculous. He's making this up. None of that is real." Marcus's tone stayed calm, razor sharp. "Oh, it's real. And it's not the only thing. Karen has also been sued twice before for discrimination against homeowners. Both times, she settled quietly. Sound familiar? Gasps now. Some neighbors covered their mouths. Others turned toward Karen, eyes wide with disbelief. Marcus pressed on. And here, in Willow Creek, she's repeated the same pattern, targeting residents she doesn't approve of, fabricating violations, weaponizing her position to harass people until they leave. I was just her latest target, but I won't be her victim. The crowd was buzzing now, voices rising. Some shouted, "Is this true?" Others demanded answers. Karen's face was ashen, but her fury burned through. She grabbed the papers from Marcus's hand and ripped them in half. Lies. All lies. He's dangerous, don't you see? He's here to destroy us. Marcus didn't flinch. Dangerous? I'm here to protect the truth. And the truth is this. Karen Whitfield has abused this community for years. Tonight, that ends. A heavy silence fell. Then, from the back, an older man stood. It was Mr. Caldwell, one of the longest residents of Willow Creek. "I've lived here 20 years, he said, voice steady. "And I've seen Karen run off family after family. Good people, folks who didn't deserve it. I stayed quiet, but no more. He's right. This has to stop." Another neighbor chimed in. Then another. The voices grew, swelling into a wave. "Enough is enough. She's been bleeding us dry. She tried to find me for planting flowers." Karen spun in a panic, shouting over them. "You're all ungrateful. You wouldn't have this community without me." I made Willow Creek what it is. Marcus stepped forward, his voice cutting through the uproar. No, Karen. This community made itself, and tonight, it chooses who it wants to be. So I'll ask, do you want leadership built on lies and fear, or on fairness and respect? The crowd erupted. Cheers drowned out Karen's protests. Some residents chanted, "Vote her out. Vote her out." In the chaos, one of the board members, the same man who looked nervous during the emergency meeting, rose with trembling hands. I call for an immediate vote of no confidence in Karen Whitfield as president of the HOA. The motion was seconded instantly. Hands shot up across the lawn, one after another, unanimous and overwhelming. Karen screamed, her voice breaking. "You can't do this. I am the HOA." But her words were lost in the roar of neighbors finally breaking free of her grip. Marcus stood tall, watching as the tide turned completely, his expression unreadable but steady. He hadn't needed to shout. He hadn't needed to threaten. He had simply held up the truth and let it burn away the lies. As the vote concluded and Karen stormed off into the night, Marcus exhaled slowly. The war wasn't just over, it was a rout. But deep down, he knew Karen wasn't finished. People like her never bowed out quietly. The question wasn't if she would strike again. It was when and how. For now, though, Willow Creek had chosen a new path, and Marcus Reed had become its reluctant hero. The night Karen was voted out, Willow Creek felt electric with relief. Neighbors lingered long after the barbecue, laughing and talking freely for the first time in years. Children played past their curfews. Music carried into the night, and people approached Marcus one by one to shake his hand. "You saved this community," one woman told him, tears in her eyes. "We should have stood up to her years ago," another admitted. Marcus smiled politely, but inside, he stayed guarded. He'd seen this before, in cases, in interrogations, in sting operations. When someone like Karen loses power, they don't just disappear, they implode. And implosions always leave damage. The damage came faster than even Marcus expected. By morning, a new storm brewed. Overnight, anonymous flyers had been slipped under doors and plastered on mailboxes. Bold red letters screamed across the top. "Marcus Reed is a fraud." The flyer accused Marcus of lying about his FBI background, of falsifying evidence against Karen, of moving into Willow Creek under false pretenses. It called him an outsider, a manipulator, and warned neighbors not to trust him. Marcus stood at the end of his driveway, holding one of the flyers, jaw tight. Across the street, a cluster of residents whispered as they read theirs. Karen. Of course it was Karen. Later that day, Marcus found his tires slashed. Not one, all four. He crouched by the car, running a hand along the deep gashes. It wasn't random vandalism. It was personal and sloppy. Marcus had seen it all before. Desperate retaliation by someone losing their grip. He called it the spiral. First smear campaigns, then intimidation. Finally, reckless acts that crossed into criminal territory. Karen had officially entered the spiral. That evening, Marcus sat in his kitchen with his laptop open, scrolling through security camera footage he'd installed weeks ago, just in case. At 2:43 a.m., the grainy footage showed a figure creeping down his driveway. Blonde hair tied tight, flashlight in hand, knife glinting in the dark. Karen, clear as day. She slashed the tires methodically, then slipped away into the night. Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his nose. There it was, the mistake he'd been waiting for. But part of him couldn't shake the unease. A cornered animal was most dangerous when it had nothing left to lose. The next day, Marcus didn't confront her. Not yet. He needed Karen to dig deeper. But Karen made the first move. He was jogging through the park when a police cruiser pulled up alongside him. Two officers stepped out. "Marcus Reed?" one asked. "Yes, you're under investigation for harassment and fraud. We need you to come with us for questioning." Marcus blinked. "Excuse me?" The officer held up a paper. "We've received multiple complaints from HOA members, filed by Karen Whitfield. Claims of stalking, threats, and falsifying documents. Marcus almost laughed. Almost. You've got to be kidding me. But he didn't resist. He went calmly, letting them cuff him, letting the neighbors peeking through their curtains see. He knew how this game worked. At the station, Marcus requested his lawyer immediately. Then, while waiting, he asked one question. Do you have the complaints in writing? They handed him the file. And there it was. Pages of fabricated incidents, signed under Karen's name, some even with forged witness statements. It was sloppy. Too sloppy. Marcus smiled to himself. She just handed him everything he needed. Back in Willow Creek, though, rumors spread like wildfire. Some neighbors began to doubt. The flyers, the arrest, the whispers. Karen's smear campaign was doing its work. Marcus returned home that evening to cold stares from a few residents. A man who had thanked him days ago now crossed the street to avoid him. It stung. But Marcus reminded himself, truth takes longer to settle than lies. And soon, he would have proved strong enough to silence every doubt. 2 nights later, it came to a head. Marcus was sitting on his porch, sipping black coffee under the dim glow of the porch light. He heard footsteps before he saw her. Karen, storming across the lawn, eyes wild, fists clenched. You think you've won? She spat, stopping at the edge of his steps. You humiliated me. You stole my community. Do you know who I am? Marcus set his mug down slowly. I know exactly who you are. You're nothing, she hissed. Just some washed-up agent hiding in the suburbs, pretending to be a hero. But I'll make sure everyone sees the truth. You won't last here. You'll crawl out like the rest of them. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low, almost pitying. Karen, listen to yourself. You've already lost. The only question is how far you'll fall before you hit bottom. Karen's eyes flickered, a flash of doubt behind the fury. But pride smothered it. She stepped closer, jabbing a finger toward him. You're finished. I'll ruin you if it's the last thing I do. Marcus met her gaze, unblinking. You already tried. And now I've got video proof of you slashing my tires. How do you think the police will handle that? Especially after you filed false reports. Karen froze, her face drained of color. For once, she had no words. Marcus stood slowly, towering over her. Here's the deal. Tomorrow morning, I turn the evidence in. You can either confess and step away quietly, or you can keep digging. But if you do, the only place you'll be living is a prison cell. Karen's jaw trembled. Then, with a strangled scream, she spun on her heel and stormed into the night. The following morning, Marcus walked into the precinct with a neatly organized file. Security footage, falsified complaints, slashed tires, and a full background report on Karen's prior cases. The detective on duty raised his eyebrows as Marcus slid it across the desk. Looks like you've been busy, the detective muttered. Marcus simply replied, just tying up loose ends. By noon, Karen was arrested, charged with filing false reports, vandalism, and embezzlement pending financial investigation. When the police led her away in cuffs, neighbors gathered outside. Some gasped, others whispered, but most sighed in relief. For the first time, Willow Creek felt free. That night, Marcus sat on his porch again, the air cool and quiet. A few neighbors passed by, offering tentative smiles. The doubt was fading. Trust was returning. But Marcus didn't smile back. He just stared into the dark street, deep in thought. He knew Karen's downfall wasn't the end. It was just another reminder. Power attracts corruption. And communities like Willow Creek, any community, were only ever one bad leader away from falling into chaos. He had stopped Karen, but there would always be another Karen, somewhere else, waiting, and Marcus Reed would be ready. Willow Creek was quiet the morning after Karen's arrest. Not the heavy silence of fear or tension, but the gentle kind that follows a long storm. The air lighter, the streets softer, as if the entire neighborhood had exhaled at once. For years, Karen's voice had been the loudest sound in town. Her complaints, her threats, her demands, they echoed through whole meetings, hissed across fences, and filled mailboxes with venom. Now, that voice was gone. Marcus woke early, as he always did. Years in the FBI had wired his body to rise before dawn, his mind ready before the sun. He brewed his coffee, stepped onto the porch, and took in the stillness. For the first time since moving here, he didn't feel like a soldier guarding enemy territory. He felt home. Across the street, Mrs. Caldwell, the widow Karen once berated over lawn decorations, was out watering her roses. When she spotted Marcus, she smiled warmly. "Morning, Mr. Reed." Marcus lifted his mug in return. Morning. It was simple. But in that simplicity, he felt something he hadn't in years. Normalcy. By mid-morning, neighbors gathered in the park for an impromptu meeting. Without Karen to dominate the whole, people finally spoke freely. A young father raised his hand. "We should focus on making this place feel like a community again. Not just rules and fines, real connection." A woman nodded. "Like block parties, movie nights, things that bring us together." Even those who once stayed silent found their voices. An elderly man stood, his voice trembling. "I stayed quiet too long. I let her push people around. Never again. If we see someone abusing power, we have to stand together." The crowd murmured in agreement. Heads turned toward Marcus. Some expectant, some grateful. He cleared his throat. "I didn't come here to lead. I came here to live a quiet life. But I also know this. Communities don't survive on silence. They survive on courage. And sometimes, courage is just standing up and saying, 'This isn't right.'" A round of applause followed, not thunderous, but steady, genuine. For Marcus, that was enough. But not everyone healed so quickly. A small group of Karen's loyalists still whispered in corners, convinced she was framed, convinced Marcus was the real villain. Fear and manipulation didn't vanish overnight. Some wounds ran deep. Marcus knew better than to fight them head on. Time would do what arguments could not. Truth was a patient ally. Later that week, Marcus received a call from Detective Alvarez, the officer who'd taken Karen into custody. "Just wanted to update you," Alvarez said. "Karen's charges are sticking. False reports, vandalism, embezzlement. We found discrepancies in HOA funds dating back years. She'll be facing prison time." Marcus let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Good. Maybe now people can finally breathe," Alvarez chuckled. "From what I hear, you're a local hero. Some of the guys at the station are calling you the whole Avenger." Marcus smirked. "Let's not make that a thing." Despite the jokes, Marcus carried the weight of it all. Nights found him on the porch, staring into the dark, replaying the battles. Not just with Karen, but with himself. He had left the bureau to escape conflict, to live quietly. Yet conflict had found him anyway. And maybe, he realized, it always would. Because corruption, abuse, injustice, they didn't live in government offices or criminal dens alone. They lived on quiet suburban streets, behind white picket fences, in the smiling face of a neighbor with too much power. You didn't escape it. You faced it. One evening, as he walked the neighborhood, Marcus saw children drawing chalk art on the sidewalks.